Isabel Martinez had lost everything. For 3 weeks, she and her 2 children survived on the streets, turned away from shelters, living on scraps and desperation. When her baby's cough turned dangerous one frozen morning, Isabel was out of options. Searching her threadbare purse for coins, her fingers found something metallic, a strange, rusted card. Her grandfather's final gift, dismissed for years as worthless junk. With nothing left to lose, Isabel decided to walk into the bank and present this ridiculous piece of metal. "Where are we going, Mama?" 8-year-old Sophie whispered. Isabel stared at the card. "To find out what your bisabuelo left us." The imposing stone facade of Granite Union Bank loomed ahead, its brass doors gleaming like a mirage of warmth. Isabel hesitated, doubt creeping in. What was she thinking? They'd never let someone like her pass the entrance. Yet the baby's coughing had worsened overnight, and Sophie's shoes had split at the seams. They needed a miracle. "Come on," Isabel murmured, as much to herself as to her daughter. The blast of heated air that greeted them as they pushed through the revolving doors was so shocking that Isabel felt momentarily dizzy. The marble lobby stretched before them, populated by men and women in tailored suits and polished shoes. Isabel became acutely aware of her appearance, the unmistakable weariness of homelessness etched into her face. Security noticed them immediately. "Ma'am," a uniformed guard, approached, his expression a practiced blend of authority and caution. His nameplate read, "Terry, can I help you?" "I need to speak with someone about an account," she said, forcing confidence into her voice. A second guard appeared, Marla, according to her badge, her hand resting casually on her radio. "Do you have an account number? Identification?" "I have this," Isabel said, extracting the metal card from her pocket. It was unlike any modern bank card, rectangular but slightly larger, made of what appeared to be copper or bronze, now oxidized to a mottled green-brown. Strange symbols and numbers were etched into its surface. Terry examined it with visible skepticism. "This isn't one of our cards. My grandfather gave it to me," Isabel explained. "Hugo Reyes. He said if things ever got too bad." "Ma'am, this isn't a shelter," Marla interrupted. "There's a community center 3 blocks east that opens at noon." "Please," Isabel cut in. "Just check, Hugo Reyes. Please." Something in her tone, perhaps the raw blend of dignity and despair, made Terry hesitate. He exchanged a glance with Marla. "Wait here," he finally said. "Don't approach other customers." Isabel guided Sophie to the indicated area, feeling the weight of stares from every direction. "Mama, I'm hungry," Sophie whispered. "Soon." "Mi corazón," Isabel promised, though the words felt hollow. How many meals had she missed to ensure her children ate? As they waited, Isabel's mind drifted back to her grandfather's kitchen 25 years earlier. She could almost smell the cinnamon and coffee that perpetually perfumed his modest home. Young Isabel, just 10 years old then, sat across the worn chessboard from Grandpa Hugo, her chin propped on her hands as she contemplated her next move. "Checkmate in 3 moves. Pequeña," he said. "No fair. You've been playing forever," she complained. These Sunday chess matches were her favorite part of the week. Hugo chuckled, the sound warm and rasping from decades of cigarettes he'd finally quit. "Life is like chess, Isabel. Sometimes you protect the pieces you love most. Sometimes you must sacrifice to survive." He reached into his pocket then, extracting the strange metal card. "This is for you. Keep it safe." Young Isabel turned it over in her small hands, confused by its weight and the odd engravings. "What is it?" "Insurance," he replied. "If life ever pushes you into a hole so deep you can't climb out, this card will be the rope. But only use it if you truly believe there's still a way out." The memory dissolved as the baby's coughing intensified. Isabel rocked him gently. "What's his name?" a soft voice asked. Isabel looked up to find an elderly woman in an expensive camel hair coat standing before them. "Miguel?" Isabel answered after a moment of surprise. "After my father," the woman nodded. "I raised 4 boys myself. The youngest had a terrible colic, coughed just like that." She reached into her purse and pressed a $20 bill into Isabel's hand. Get him something warm to drink." Before Isabel could respond, the woman was gone, vanishing into the busy lobby. She stared at the money, equal parts grateful and humiliated. Once, she had been the one putting donations in charity boxes. Once, she had a home, a husband, and a future. "Ms. Martinez?" Terry had returned. "Someone will see you now. Please follow me." Isabel gathered Miguel against her chest, took Sophie's hand, and followed the guard toward a bank of elevators at the rear of the lobby. The elevator ascended silently, carrying them to a floor Isabel hadn't known existed. When the doors opened, they revealed a dramatically different environment from the public lobby below. Here, dark wood paneling and muted lighting created an atmosphere of discreet luxury. The carpet was thick enough to swallow the sound of their footsteps. Terry guided them to a conference room where a man was waiting, tall, bald, with a careful posture. He stood as they entered. "Ms. Martinez, I'm Marvin Rowe, head of Legacy Accounts. Please, sit down." Isabel perched nervously on the edge of a leather chair, Sophie beside her. The baby nestled in her arms. She felt wildly out of place, like a stain on expensive fabric. "You presented this at reception," Marvin said, gesturing to the metal card. "My grandfather gave it to me," Isabel explained, the story sounding increasingly absurd to her own ears. "May I ask what circumstances bring you here today?" Marvin's question was carefully framed. "We're homeless," she finally said, the words burning her throat. "My husband died 18 months ago. I lost my job, then our apartment. The shelters are full. We slept in a bus stop last night." She expected pity, perhaps even discomfort. Instead, Marvin nodded as if confirming a hypothesis. "The Reyes Protocol," he murmured, almost to himself. Then, louder, "Ms. Martinez, would you be willing to provide a fingerprint verification?" Before she could answer, the conference room door opened, and a young woman entered carrying a tablet and a small electronic device. "This is Andrea from our security department," Marvin explained. Bewildered, Isabel allowed Andrea to guide her index finger to the scanner. A moment later, the device emitted a soft chime. Andrea's professional composure slipped for a fraction of a second. "It's a match," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "Thank you, Andrea," Marvin said. When they were alone again, Marvin's demeanor shifted subtly, warmer, more human. "Ms. Martinez, what do you know about your grandfather's financial arrangements?" "Nothing. He lived modestly. He worked for the railroad, I think. He died when I was 15. Your grandfather established a very specific type of trust. We call it a legacy contingency account. It can only be accessed under particular circumstances." "What circumstances?" Isabel asked. "The exact language of the trust stipulates, to be unlocked only when descendant is verifiably destitute." Marvin's expression was unreadable. "It seems your grandfather anticipated this possibility and prepared accordingly." "I don't understand." "Ms. Martinez, upon fingerprint verification and confirmation of your current circumstances, you now have access to the Reyes Trust. The current value, including all investments and properties, is approximately $142 million. Isabel heard the words but couldn't process their meaning. Million? The concept was too vast to grasp when just hours ago she'd been calculating if they could afford a single hot meal. "That's not possible," she whispered. "There's been a mistake." "There's no mistake," Marvin assured her. "Your grandfather was exceptionally strategic in his investments. The trust has been actively managed for decades, growing substantially over time." "But why would he?" Isabel trailed off. "The trust documentation includes a letter, which I'll provide to you shortly. But first, there are immediate arrangements to be made." Marvin pressed a button on the conference table. "Your children look like they could use some food and perhaps medical attention for the little one?" As if summoned by magic, a different staff member appeared with a tray of sandwiches, fruit, and bottles of water. Sophie's eyes widened at the sight of food. "Go ahead, mi vida," Isabel murmured, still dazed. As Sophie reached eagerly for a sandwich, Marvin continued, "We'll arrange temporary accommodations for you immediately. A hotel suite. Our concierge service can provide whatever essentials you need tonight. Tomorrow, we can begin a more thorough discussion of your options." Isabel stared at him, struggling to align this surreal conversation with the reality of her life. "Why are you helping us?" she finally asked. "Ms. Martinez, your grandfather was quite explicit in his instructions. He said, when she comes, she'll be proud but broken. Don't let bureaucracy break her further." Tears pricked at Isabel's eyes. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't need to say anything," Marvin replied. "Let's focus on getting you and your children comfortable tonight. Everything else can wait until tomorrow." The presidential suite at the Westmont Hotel was larger than the entire apartment Isabel had shared with Louis. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panoramic view of the city now blanketed in snow, the streetlights below glowing like earthbound stars. Plush carpets swallowed her footsteps as she moved from room to room. In one bedroom, Sophie bounced experimentally on a king-sized bed, her small face alight with wonder. In another, Miguel slept peacefully in a hastily arranged crib, his breathing easier after the pediatrician Marvin had somehow summoned to the hotel. Bronchitis, the doctor had pronounced. The antibiotics should help quickly. Now, standing alone in the cavernous marble bathroom, Isabel stared at her reflection in a gilt-edged mirror. A stranger looked back, hollow-cheeked, with dark circles beneath eyes too old for her 34 years. Slowly, she turned on the hot water tap. Steam rose, fogging the mirror, obscuring the woman she no longer recognized. She cried for Luis, stolen by a rain-slicked road and a driver who couldn't stop in time. She cried for the home they'd built together, now occupied by strangers. She cried for Sophie's lost innocence and Miguel's precarious start to life. When the tears finally subsided, Isabel washed her face with hotel soap that smelled of jasmine and sandalwood. She dried herself with a towel so plush it felt like a cloud against her skin. In the suite's kitchen area, she found a selection of food that had been delivered while she was in the bathroom. Isabel prepared a plate for her daughter, marveling at how surreal it felt to serve food on fine china instead of salvaged fast food containers. "Can we stay here forever, Mama?" Sophie asked, twirling spaghetti around her fork. "No, mi vida," Isabel replied. "But we don't have to worry about where we'll sleep tomorrow, or the next day." After Sophie had eaten her fill, more food in one sitting than she'd had in weeks, Isabel tucked her into the enormous bed. Isabel checked on Miguel, adjusting his blanket and brushing her lips against his forehead, cooler now after the first dose of medicine. Then she returned to the main room, where a manila envelope waited on the coffee table. Inside was the letter Marvin had mentioned, her grandfather's words, "My dearest Isabel, if you are reading this, then the safety net I created has caught you. I am sorry that life has brought you to such desperate circumstances, but I am not sorry for the foresight that allows me to help you now, even from beyond the grave. You may wonder how I accumulated such wealth when I lived so simply. The truth is both ordinary and extraordinary. I made one brilliant investment in my youth, a small technology company that few believed would succeed. That single decision, followed by decades of careful management, created the foundation of your inheritance. I chose to live modestly because I knew the seductive danger of wealth. I watched friends and colleagues transformed by money. I wanted something different for you. I wanted you to know the value of work, of compassion, of seeing people for who they are rather than what they own. But I also feared that misfortune might find you, as it once found me. Few remember now, but before my success, I knew hunger. I slept on park benches. I felt the particular shame that society reserves for those who have fallen from grace. This trust is designed with specific intentions. You will find that while you now have substantial resources, there are structures in place to prevent the pitfalls of sudden wealth. My hope is that you will use these funds to rebuild your life, to secure your future, and perhaps most importantly, to extend the same compassion to others that you now receive. Remember our chess games, pequeña. Life is strategy, sacrifice, and protection. Sometimes we lose important pieces. Sometimes we must retreat. But the game continues as long as the king stands. With eternal love, your grandfather, Hugo Isabel read the letter 3 times, her grandfather's voice so vivid in her mind. She folded the pages carefully and returned them to the envelope, then crossed to the window and gazed out at the snow-covered city. A soft knock at the suite door pulled her from her thoughts. Isabel opened it to find a young man in a hotel uniform holding a shopping bag. "Miss Martinez? The items you requested." Isabel hadn't requested anything, but she accepted the bag with murmured thanks. Inside were toiletries, a pair of pajamas, and basic clothing for her and the children, all in the correct sizes. Marvin's work, no doubt. After changing into the new pajamas, soft cotton that felt like a luxury against her skin, Isabel settled on the couch, still unable to fully process the day's events. Her phone buzzed, another of Marvin's arrangements. Her old number had been reconnected, and the phone itself charged while she was attending to the children. The screen showed a text message from an unfamiliar number. "Ms. Martinez, this is Ari Patel from Granite Union. I'll be your dedicated financial advisor moving forward. Mr. Rowe asked me to check if you need anything else tonight. We have a meeting scheduled for 10 a.m. tomorrow, but I'm available any time if you have questions." Isabel stared at the message. A dedicated financial advisor. Of course. People with money, people like her now apparently, had entire teams devoted to managing their affairs. "We're fine, thank you," she typed back. "Excellent. Try to rest, Ms. Martinez. You're safe now." Those 3 words, "you're safe now," undid her carefully maintained composure. Isabel curled into the corner of the plush sofa and whispered them aloud, like an incantation she was afraid to fully believe. She repeated the phrase until it became a lullaby, rocking gently back and forth, arms wrapped around herself. Eventually, exhaustion claimed her, and she slept deeply for the first time in months. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through windows she'd forgotten to cover. For a disorienting moment, Isabel couldn't remember where she was. Reality rushed back as Sophie bounded into the room, already dressed in new clothes from the mysteriously provided bag. "Mama, there's a bathtub big enough to swim in, and the TV has all the channels." Her excitement was palpable, her movements animated in a way Isabel hadn't seen since before Luis died. Inside voice, "Mi vida," Isabel reminded her gently, though her heart swelled at her daughter's joy. "Your brother is still sleeping." As if on cue, Miguel's cries echoed from the bedroom. Isabel went to him, changed his diaper using the supplies that had appeared as if by magic, and cradled him close. A discreet knock announced the arrival of breakfast, a feast of fresh fruits, pastries, eggs, and coffee. She and Sophie ate slowly, savoring each bite, still half afraid this bounty might vanish as suddenly as it had appeared. At precisely 9, the hotel phone rang. The concierge informed her that Mr. Patel had arrived and was waiting in the lobby whenever she was ready. Reality intruded on the dreamlike sanctuary of the suite, meetings, decisions, a future suddenly vast with possibilities where before it had narrowed to the next meal, the next night's shelter. "Sophie, we need to go downstairs to meet someone," Isabel explained, helping her daughter wash sticky breakfast residue from her hands. "It's about our new situation. Are we rich now, Mama?" Sophie asked. Isabel hesitated. "We have help now," she said. "Grandpa Hugo left us a gift." Satisfied with this explanation, Sophie skipped toward the door while Isabel gathered Miguel and the diaper bag. A young Indian man in a charcoal suit approached them immediately. "Ms. Martinez, I'm Ari Patel. It's a pleasure to meet you in person." Ari led them to a private conference room off the main lobby, already prepared with a high chair for Miguel and coloring books for Sophie. The thoughtfulness of these arrangements touched Isabel unexpectedly. "Mr. Rowe sends his regards," Ari explained as they settled. "He handles the initial protocol activation, but day-to-day management falls to advisors like me." Isabel nodded. "I appreciate the help. This is all very overwhelming. I can only imagine. Let's take this one step at a time." He opened a leather portfolio. "First, practical matters. Your suite is booked for 2 weeks, which gives us time to secure more permanent housing if you wish. A credit card has been issued in your name, linked to a preliminary account with sufficient funds for immediate needs." I don't even know how to begin, she admitted. Yesterday, we had nothing. That's why I'm here, Ari said gently. You don't have to figure everything out at once. He hesitated, then added, if you don't mind my asking, how did you come to your current circumstances? The question was professional, but delivered with genuine concern. My husband Louise was a mechanic, a good one. We had a small apartment, savings, and plans for the future. Then 18 months ago, he was hit by a car while riding his motorcycle home from work. The medical bills took everything, even with insurance. I was pregnant with Miguel, working as a receptionist, but the office downsized right after my maternity leave. No severance. Isabel paused, remembering the cascade of disasters that had followed, the eviction notice, selling their car, moving to progressively cheaper and more dangerous apartments until even those were beyond reach. I had no family left except the children. Friends helped at first, but eventually, she shrugged, the gesture encompassing all the ways relationships strained and broke under the weight of prolonged need. Miguel squirmed in her arms, and she adjusted him automatically, her body attuned to his every movement after months of being his only protection against a hostile world. Before I knew it, we were on the streets. You try to stay clean, to look presentable for job interviews. But it's... She trailed off, unable to fully articulate the circular trap of homelessness, how each day became focused solely on survival, how opportunities narrowed until they disappeared entirely. Ari nodded. You don't have to keep surviving every day now, Isabel, he said. You can breathe, you can plan, you can rebuild. Something in his words, their simple permission to exist beyond crisis, broke through the protective numbness Isabel had maintained. She blinked rapidly, determined not to cry in this business meeting. Seeming to sense her emotion, Ari smoothly redirected the conversation. Let's discuss housing options. Would you prefer to remain in the city or consider suburban areas? For the next hour, Ari guided her through immediate considerations: housing, healthcare, education for Sophie, without overwhelming her with the full scope of her inheritance. He explained that her grandfather's trust included specific provisions, a structured release of funds based on time and circumstances, properties already held in her name, and investment portfolios designed for long-term stability. The full briefing can wait, Ari assured her. For now, focus on establishing stability for your family. The rest will come in time. As their meeting concluded, Ari handed her a business card with his personal cell number handwritten on the back. Call anytime, day or night. That's not just professional courtesy. I mean it. Isabel studied him, this stranger who spoke to her with respect, when just days ago she'd been invisible to most of society. Why are you being so kind? My father came to this country with nothing but hope and determination. A single act of kindness from a stranger changed the trajectory of his life. Our family never forgot that lesson. He gathered his papers, then added quietly, besides, I have children too. I can't imagine the courage it took to keep them safe through what you've endured. After Ari left, Isabel remained in the conference room, the black credit card on the table before her like a foreign object she wasn't sure how to handle. Sophie continued coloring contentedly while Miguel dozed in the crook of Isabel's arm. The first week passed in a blur of appointments, paperwork, and gradual adjustments to their new reality. Isabel moved through each day in a state of cautious disbelief, waiting for the dream to shatter. For someone to reveal it had all been an elaborate mistake, but the miracle held. Miguel's health improved dramatically with proper medical care. Sophie was enrolled in a good school that could accommodate her mid-year transfer, and Isabel began the process of reclaiming her identity from the erosion of homelessness. Small steps like a haircut, new clothes that actually fit, a physical examination that addressed the toll months of malnutrition and stress had taken on her body. Yet, despite these positive changes, Isabel found herself hesitating to fully embrace their altered circumstances. She used the credit card sparingly, purchasing only necessities despite Ari's gentle assurances that the funds were hers to use as needed. She declined the real estate agent's suggestions of luxury condominiums and historic brownstones, instead gravitating toward modest, practical homes in safe but unremarkable neighborhoods. You're worth more than you're allowing yourself, Ari observed during one of their regular meetings. The trust your grandfather established is designed to provide security and comfort, not merely survival. It doesn't feel real, she finally admitted, and I'm afraid that if I start believing in it, depending on it, you fear it will disappear, Ari finished for her. He opened a folder and extracted several dark photographs, spreading them across the desk. They showed an elegant older man, Hugo Reyes, in his later years, standing before various properties and businesses. Your grandfather was remarkably strategic, Ari explained. These assets have been accumulating value for decades. The trust is structured with multiple layers of protection, diversified across different markets and investment vehicles. It would take a global financial collapse to significantly impact your security, and even then, there are safeguards. Isabel studied the photos, searching for the grandfather she remembered. He never seemed wealthy, she murmured. He lived in a small house, drove an old Buick, packed his own lunch. According to the trust documents, that was a deliberate choice. He believed wealth should be a tool, not an identity. Ari hesitated. There's something else you should see. He produced another document, older than the others. It was a newspaper clipping from 1951, showing a much younger Hugo standing in a breadline during what appeared to be a harsh winter. Before his investment succeeded, your grandfather knew hardship intimately, Ari said. The trust includes his personal journal from that period. He writes about sleeping in train stations, about the particular shame of being looked through rather than seen. He understood what you've endured, Isabel, perhaps better than most. Isabel touched the photograph gently, a piece of her grandfather's life she'd never known. It explained so much: his frugality despite apparent comfort, his insistence on treating every person with dignity regardless of their circumstances. He created this trust for you, but also because of his own experience, Ari continued. The official activation clause, when descendant is verifiably destitute, was his way of ensuring that help would come precisely when you most needed it, but couldn't access it through conventional means. I still don't know if I can do this, Isabel confessed. Do what, exactly? Ari inquired. Accept this transformation. Be this new person. Live this new life. You don't have to become someone new, Isabel. You're still the same woman who protected her children through impossible circumstances, who found courage when there was every reason for despair. The only difference is that now you have resources to match your resilience. That evening, after the children were asleep, Isabel found herself drawn to the suite's expansive windows. The city spread before her, a tapestry of lights and shadows. Somewhere in that landscape were the places they'd sheltered, the bus stop where they'd spent their last desperate night, the underpass where they'd hidden during rainstorms, the public library where they'd sought warmth during opening hours. Isabel's reflection stared back at her from the window, a ghost suspended between two worlds. Her phone chimed with a text message from Ari. Just checking in. Hope all is well. Remember, small steps are still progress. Isabel found herself responding honestly. I'm struggling to reconcile who I was a week ago with who I am now. It feels like betrayal somehow. Of whom? The woman who survived against all odds? She deserves this reprieve. Isabel didn't respond, but the message resonated as she prepared for bed in the luxurious suite. That night, she dreamed of Luis for the first time in months. Not his accident or the devastating aftermath, but an ordinary morning in their small apartment. He stood at the stove, making pancakes, humming off-key as sunlight spilled across the worn linoleum floor. You're doing great, Bella, he said, using the nickname only he had ever called her. She woke with tears on her cheeks but a curious lightness in her chest, as if something tightly wound had begun to loosen. The next morning, Isabel made a decision. After dropping Sophie at her new school, she asked the driver Ari had arranged to take her to an address in one of the city's struggling neighborhoods. The man raised an eyebrow but complied without comment. The women's shelter was housed in a converted church, its stone facade weathered but dignified. Isabel had tried to get a space there twice during their time on the streets, but it had always been at capacity, with waiting lists stretching for weeks. At the reception desk, a harried-looking woman glanced up with the practiced wariness of someone who had heard every possible story. "Can I help you?" I'm looking for Shelley Morales, Isabel said. She's a social worker here, I think. And you are? Isabel Martinez. She tried to help me and my children a few months ago. Wait here. Minutes later, a stout woman with salt and pepper hair emerged from an office. Isabel? My God, I almost didn't recognize you. Shelley enveloped her in a warm hug that smelled of patchouli and mint. I've been worried sick. You missed our last appointment, and when I checked the usual spots, she pulled back, studying Isabel's transformed appearance. What happened? It's a long story. Could we talk somewhere private? In Shelley's cramped office, surrounded by overflowing filing cabinets and motivational posters, Isabel recounted the events of the past week. Shelley listened with increasing amazement, occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. I've been doing this work for 27 years, she said. I've never heard anything like it. It's like something from a fairy tale. That's why it doesn't feel real, Isabel admitted. Shelley reached across the desk to squeeze her hand. Oh, it's real. Just look at you, already gaining back the weight you lost. Her expression turned thoughtful, but I understand the disorientation. Trauma and sudden change, even positive change, can be incredibly destabilizing. I don't know how to be this new person, Isabel confessed. The woman with a financial advisor and a driver and a future. You don't become someone else overnight, Shelley said. You're still Isabel, Luis's wife, Sophie, and Miguel's mother, a woman who endured the unendurable with grace and dignity intact. She leaned forward. Money changes your circumstances, not your character. The words echoed what Ari had been trying to tell her, but somehow hearing them from Shelley, who had known her at her lowest point, made them more believable. I want to help, Isabel said suddenly. The shelter, the women here, I want to do something. That's understandable. Many people who've experienced hardship want to give back once they're stable, but Isabel, you're still in transition yourself. Give yourself time to heal before taking on others' burdens. But I have resources now, Isabel insisted. But rushing into philanthropy before you've secured your own foundation is like trying to build a house starting with the roof. She smiled gently. Get settled. Get healthy, physically and emotionally. Find your footing in this new reality. Then we can talk about how you might help others most effectively. Isabel reluctantly acknowledged the wisdom in this advice. As she prepared to leave, Shelley handed her a business card. This is Dr. Levine, a therapist who specializes in trauma and major life transitions. She works with many of our clients, but also with people who've experienced sudden wealth or status changes. She held up a hand to forestall Isabel's protest. Isabel tucked the forwarding card into her purse, promising to consider it. As she left the shelter, she noticed a familiar figure huddled in the building's entrance alcove, an older woman with weather-beaten skin and a tattered coat several sizes too large for her thin frame. Rita, Isabel approached. The woman looked up, roomy eyes narrowing before recognition dawned. Isabel, that you? Lord, you look different. Her gaze turned suspicious. What happened to you? Get yourself a rich boyfriend? Isabel smiled despite herself. Rita's bluntness had been a strange comfort during their brief encounters on the streets. The older woman had shared food and advice with equal frankness, showing Isabel which public bathrooms were safest and which store owners might offer day-old bread without calling the police. No boyfriend, Isabel replied, settling beside Rita. Just an unexpected change of fortune. There must have been some change. You're looking fat and happy compared to last time. Are you waiting for a bed here? Isabel asked. Third day trying. They're always full, but the desk lady lets me sit inside when it gets really cold. Rita pulled her coat tighter around her bony shoulders. Come with me, Isabel said suddenly. I can help. Rita eyed her suspiciously. Help how? I don't do charity. It's not charity, Isabel insisted. It's paying back a debt. You shared your food with us when we had nothing. You showed me where Miguel could get warm when he was sick. That was just human decency, Rita muttered, though she looked pleased at the acknowledgement. Exactly, Isabel agreed. It took more persuasion, but eventually Rita agreed to accompany Isabel, though she muttered skeptically throughout the drive to the hotel. When they arrived, Isabel, arranged for a room on a different floor from the suite, sensing that Rita would be more comfortable with some independence, and ordered a meal sent up immediately. "Just for a few days," Isabel promised when Rita protested, "until we can figure out something more permanent." Later that afternoon, Isabel met with Ari in the hotel's restaurant. He listened without judgment as she recounted her visit to the shelter and her impulsive decision to help Rita. "I'm not surprised," he said. "Compassion often flows most freely from those who've known its absence. Shelley thinks I should focus on stabilizing my own situation first," Isabel admitted. "There's wisdom in that approach, but small acts of kindness along the way don't have to detract from your primary focus." He smiled. "Your grandfather's journal mentions that even at his lowest point, he would sometimes share what little he had. He believed that generosity wasn't a luxury of the wealthy, but a practice that preserved humanity in difficult times." "I'm thinking of taking that house on Maple Street," she said. "The one with the small yard. It's close to Sophie's school, and it feels manageable." "An excellent choice," Ari approved. "Modest but comfortable, in a safe neighborhood with good amenities nearby. I'll contact the agent this afternoon." As Ari outlined the purchase process, Isabel felt a subtle shift within herself, the first tentative acceptance that this new reality might actually be sustainable. She wasn't yet ready to embrace it fully, to trust in its permanence, but she was beginning to imagine a future beyond immediate survival. That evening, as Isabel helped Sophie with her homework, her daughter looked up with unexpected seriousness. "Mama, are we going to be okay now?" "Yes, mi vida," Isabel said firmly, gathering her daughter close. "Promise?" Sophie pressed. "I promise," she whispered, and for the first time, she truly believed it herself. The house on Maple Street was nothing like the luxury apartments Ari had initially shown her. A modest two-bedroom Cape Cod with a small fenced yard, it had the lived-in charm of a place where memories had been made. "It's perfect," Isabel declared the moment they walked through the front door. Sophie immediately ran to explore, her excited voice echoing through the rooms, while Miguel crawled determinedly across the sun-warmed living room floor. Ari raised an eyebrow. "You understand that with your resources, you could purchase virtually any property in the city? This is the one that feels like home," Isabel replied. The purchase process moved with astonishing speed, accelerated by cash payment and Ari's efficient management. Within 2 weeks of first seeing the property, Isabel found herself standing in the empty living room, house keys in hand, the afternoon sun casting patterns through lace curtains the previous owners had left behind. "So what now?" Sophie asked, twirling in the empty space. "Do we sleep on the floor?" Isabel laughed, a sound that was becoming less rusty with each passing day. "No, mi vida. Now we make it ours." They started small. Beds and essential furniture delivered the same day, household basics purchased during a somewhat overwhelming trip to a department store. Ari had arranged for a car as well, not the luxury sedan he'd initially suggested, but a practical SUV with good safety ratings that Isabel could drive herself. That first afternoon in her new car, Isabel found herself driving aimlessly through the city, retracing the geography of their struggle. At a stoplight near the eastern edge of downtown, Isabel spotted a familiar figure, Rita's friend Jasmine, a teenage runaway who had sometimes watched Miguel when Isabel needed to visit government offices or apply for jobs. The girl was thin, her posture defensive as she hurried along the sidewalk, glancing frequently over her shoulder. Without conscious decision, Isabel pulled over and called out, "Jasmine!" The girl froze, then turned slowly, her expression wary until recognition dawned. "Isabel, holy shit, is that really you?" "Get in," Isabel offered, unlocking the passenger door. Jasmine hesitated, street-honed survival instincts at war with the memory of past kindness. Finally, she slid into the passenger seat, immediately running her hands over the clean upholstery with undisguised appreciation. "Damn, you really upgraded," she observed, taking in Isabel's improved appearance. "Rita said you hit the lottery or something, but I thought she was just high." "Not exactly the lottery," Isabel replied. "But yes, things have changed. Where are you headed?" "Nowhere specific." Just trying to avoid that creep Marcel from the 3rd Street shelter. He's been following me since this morning. Isabel frowned. Marcel? The volunteer coordinator? Yeah. He offers girls private accommodations if they're grateful enough. Jasmine made air quotes around the euphemisms he. Started hitting on me last week when I went in to use the shower facilities. A cold anger settled in Isabel's chest, a protective rage that felt clarifying after months of helpless submission to circumstance. Has he hurt you? Nah, I'm too quick. Jasmine attempted bravado. But he knows all my usual spots now. It was harder to shake him today. You're coming home with me. What? No, I don't need. I have a spare bedroom, hot water, and food. Stay until this Marcel situation cools down, or until you find something better. Why would you do that? We barely know each other. Because someone helped me when I needed it. Now I can help you. She paused, then added more lightly. Besides, you were good with Miguel. I could use a babysitter sometimes. I guess I could hang for a few days, she conceded, though her posture remained guarded. But I don't do charity, Isabel smiled. It's not charity, it's human decency. By the time they reached the house on Maple Street, Sophie was ecstatic at the prospect of a guest, while Miguel seemed to remember Jasmine, reaching for her with a delighted gurgle. You can stay as long as you need, Isabel assured her, showing her to the small bedroom they hadn't yet furnished. We can pick up whatever you need tomorrow. That night, with Jasmine safely installed in the spare room and the children asleep, Isabel sat at her new kitchen table and opened her laptop, another recent purchase that still felt vaguely illicit after months of using public computers at the Boer library. She researched Marcel at the 3rd Street shelter, finding concerning patterns in anonymous reviews and comments that confirmed Jasmine's account. The next morning, Isabel made a call to Shelley Morales. I need your help with something, she explained. There's a volunteer at the 3rd Street shelter, Marcel, who's been harassing young women. Unfortunately, that doesn't surprise me. The director there is notoriously lax about background checks. We've had several clients report similar concerns, but without formal complaints, there's little action we can take. What would constitute a formal complaint? Documented incidents, witness statements, patterns of behavior, evidence substantial enough that the board couldn't ignore it without risking liability. Shelley paused. Why? Has someone you know been targeted? Yes, Isabel replied, watching through the window as Jasmine played with Sophie in the backyard. Gathering evidence takes time, Shelley cautioned, and many victims are reluctant to come forward, especially those in vulnerable situations. I understand, Isabel said, a plan already forming in her mind. Over the next week, Isabel worked methodically. With Jasmine's cautious cooperation and Shelley's guidance, she connected with other young women who had encountered Marcel. Using resources from her trust, she hired a private investigator to document the man's pattern of targeting vulnerable shelter residents. She arranged safe temporary housing for those willing to provide statements, ensuring they wouldn't face retaliation. When the evidence was compiled, a devastating dossier of predatory behavior spanning at least 2 years, Isabel didn't go directly to the shelter's apathetic director. Instead, she approached the board of directors and major donors simultaneously, presenting the findings with a clear ultimatum. Address the situation immediately or face public exposure and potential legal action. Marcel was removed from his position and reported to authorities. The director who had enabled him was placed on administrative leave pending review, and Isabel, working behind the scenes through Shelley, helped establish new safety protocols and reporting mechanisms for shelter residents. You're a force of nature when you set your mind to something, Ari observed during their weekly meeting. Your grandfather would be proud. Isabel felt a flicker of satisfaction. It's a small thing, really. The system is still broken in so many ways. But meaningful change often begins with small, targeted actions like this. He studied her thoughtfully. You're finding your footing in this new reality. She couldn't deny it. The past month had brought a gradual shift in how she viewed herself and her circumstances. The paralyzing shock had given way to cautious acceptance, then to a growing sense of purpose. The trust was no longer just a miraculous rescue, it was becoming a tool, a means to effect change she had once been powerless to create. Isabel began to use her resources more confidently, not extravagantly, but purposefully. She enrolled Sophie in a swimming class. She hired a part-time nanny to help with Miguel while she devoted time to understanding the full scope of her inheritance. She even scheduled her first session with Dr. Levine, the therapist Shelley had recommended. The house on Maple Street was becoming a home. Furniture filled the rooms, comfortable rather than ostentatious. Photos appeared on walls, some rescued from storage units Isabel had been unable to maintain during their homelessness, others newly taken to commemorate fresh beginnings. The kitchen was stocked with food. Most significantly, Isabel began driving a different route each day, not to revisit the geography of their hardship, but to seek out those still trapped in similar circumstances. One evening, returning from a visit to Rita, now settled in a senior apartment Isabel had helped her secure, she spotted an elderly woman huddled at a bus stop, surrounded by plastic bags containing what appeared to be all her worldly possessions. The woman's face was familiar. It took Isabel a moment to place her. During their last week on the streets, this woman had shared a packet of beans with Isabel when Miguel was fussing from hunger. Without hesitation, Isabel pulled over and approached the woman. "Excuse me," she said. "You may not remember me, but you helped me and my baby a few months ago. Near St. Michael's Church, you gave us some beans." The pretty lady with the two little ones, "You're looking better, dear." Isabel smiled. "Yes, things have improved for us, and I'd like to help you now, if you'll let me. I don't take handouts, just human decency. Nobody helped me when I needed it most, except you. You don't forget kindness like that." It took some persuasion, but eventually the woman, who introduced herself as Eleanor, accepted Isabel's offer of a hotel voucher and a meal. As they sat together in a diner, Eleanor shared her story: a medical crisis, insurance that covered only a fraction of the costs, an adult son overseas who didn't know her situation. "I worked for 42 years, Eleanor said. "Never thought I'd end up like this." "I understand completely," Isabel replied, the words carrying the weight of genuine empathy. "Sometimes the systems that should protect us fail, but that doesn't define your worth." Before they parted, Isabel arranged for Eleanor to meet with Shelley at the Women's Resource Center, a first step toward more permanent solutions. Driving home afterward, Isabel realized that for the first time since receiving her inheritance, she felt truly aligned with its purpose. Her grandfather hadn't intended the trust as merely a safety net for her family, but as a means to extend the same compassion to others. That evening, as she tucked Sophie into bed, her daughter asked an unexpected question. "Mama, are we rich now?" Isabel considered her answer carefully. "We have enough," she said finally. "More than enough. And with that comes responsibility." "Like Spider-Man?" Sophie asked seriously. "With great power comes great responsibility?" Isabel laughed softly. "Something like that. It means we need to remember what it was like before, and help others when we can." Sophie nodded solemnly. "I remember. It was scary sometimes." She paused. "But you always made me feel safe anyway." The simple observation, her daughter's recognition of how hard Isabel had fought to protect them even in their darkest moments, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. "I tried, mi vida." "You did good, Mama," Sophie declared, "and now we can help other people do good too." Later, sitting on the back porch with a cup of tea, Isabel watched fireflies begin their evening dance across the small yard. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt a sense of genuine peace, not the exhausted numbness that had sustained her through homelessness, but a quiet certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be. The path forward was becoming clearer. She would continue to establish stability for her family, but also extend that stability to others where possible. It was what Grandpa Hugo would have wanted. It was, perhaps, what she had needed to do all along to truly accept this gift, as if summoned by her thoughts. Her phone chimed with a message from Ari. "Good news. The education fund for Sophie is officially established, and the Family Medical Trust is finalized." "You're building something lasting, Isabel." She smiled at his timing. "Thank you for everything," she replied. "I'm finally starting to feel like this is real. It's been real all along," came his immediate response. "You're just catching up to reality." The article appeared in the business section of the city newspaper on a Tuesday morning. Mystery woman unlocks legacy trust worth millions. Though the piece didn't mention Isabel by name, the details were specific enough to be unmistakable. A formerly homeless mother of two, a decades-old trust activated by biometric verification, a reclusive banking heiress emerging from destitution. Isabel first learned of it when Ari called, his normally calm voice tinged with concern. "Have you seen today's financial pages?" he asked. "No," Isabel replied. "I just finished getting Sophie off to school." "What happened?" "Someone at the bank leaked information about the Reyes Trust activation. The article doesn't name you directly, but it contains enough details that anyone familiar with the situation would recognize it." "How bad is it?" "Not catastrophic," Ari assured her. The reporter approached it as a human interest story. Rags to riches, hidden legacy, that sort of angle. "But it means your privacy has been compromised to some degree." Isabel closed her eyes briefly, absorbing this latest disruption to her carefully reconstructed life. The past 2 months had brought a tentative stability she was only just beginning to trust. A comfortable home, a routine for the children, small but meaningful steps toward using her resources to help others. The thought of public exposure threatened that fragile equilibrium. "What do we do?" she asked. "For now, nothing dramatic," Ari advised. "The article doesn't include your address or any identifying photos. But be prepared for increased attention. Reporters may start investigating, attempting to identify you more specifically." After ending the call, Isabel retrieved the newspaper from her driveway. The article was smaller than she'd feared, just a quarter page on page 3 of the business section, but its implications loomed large. Banking, mystery. Homeless mother activates dormant trust worth $142 million, read the headline. The text below described in general terms how an unidentified woman had presented an unusual metal access card at Granite Union Bank, triggering protocols unseen in decades. It quoted an anonymous bank source calling it like something out of a fairy tale and speculating about the woman's current whereabouts and Fordian intentions. The final paragraph was what truly chilled Isabel. Sources close to the bank's executive team suggest questions have been raised about the verification process used to confirm the woman's identity, with some expressing skepticism about the unprecedented activation of such a substantial legacy trust. By afternoon, the story had been picked up by local television news and several online outlets, each adding their own speculative embellishments. Isabel's phone began ringing with calls from unknown numbers. Reporters, she assumed, somehow connecting enough dots to find her. She let them go to voicemail. Jasmine, who had become a semi-permanent fixture in their household over the past 2 months, noticed Isabel's tension immediately when she returned from her GED prep course. "What's wrong?" she asked. "You look like someone died." Isabel handed her the newspaper. "My anonymity, apparently." Jasmine scanned the article. "This is messed up. Someone at the bank violated your privacy." She looked up sharply. "You think this means trouble?" "I don't know," Isabel admitted. "Ari says to just continue as normal for now." But your instincts say to prepare for the worst." Jasmine finished for her. "What can I do?" Isabel felt a surge of gratitude for this unexpected ally. "Help me make sure the children aren't affected. Sophie doesn't need to know about this yet." "On it," Jasmine nodded. "I can pick her up from school today if you want to deal with this banker stuff." The banker stuff intensified the following morning when Ari arrived at the house looking uncharacteristically disheveled, his usually immaculate suit slightly rumpled and dark circles under his eyes. "We have a situation," he announced. "Victor Lorne, our executive vice president of asset management, has launched an internal investigation into the Reyes Trust activation." Isabel set a cup of coffee before him. "What kind of investigation?" "The trust is legitimate. You said the verification was ironclad." "It is," Ari confirmed, "but Lorne is politically motivated. He's been angling for the bank presidency for years, and he's using your case to make a splash." He hesitated, then added reluctantly, "He's suggesting that proper protocols weren't followed, specifically that the biometric verification might have been compromised. "He's saying I'm a fraud," Isabel translated. "Essentially, yes." Ari set down his cup with precise control. "He's insinuating that you might have stolen the access card or somehow manipulated the verification system. It's absurd. Of course, the system has multiple redundancies and safeguards, but he's creating enough doubt to justify a full review." Isabel's mind raced, ahead to worst-case scenarios: the trust frozen, their home lost, the children once again facing instability. Can he actually reverse the activation? Not without substantial evidence of fraud, which doesn't exist. But he can make things difficult in the short term. He's already pressured the Trust Administration Committee to temporarily restrict access to certain assets pending review. "Why?" Isabel demanded. "Why target me specifically? I've been asking myself the same question. The publicity angle makes sense. Lorne loves attention, but the intensity of his focus seems personal somehow. Could he have known my grandfather? Some old business rivalry or grudge? I'll look into it," Ari promised. "Your grandfather was quite active in certain investment circles decades ago. It's not impossible there's a connection. What do we do in the meantime?" Marvin Rowe has already submitted formal documentation of the verification process. "I'm gathering additional supporting evidence of your identity and relationship to Hugo Reyes," he leaned forward. "And if it would help ease your mind, we could consider a DNA test to establish lineage conclusively. It's excessive, but it would create an additional layer of protection. Set it up. I want this resolved as quickly as possible." The following days brought an uncomfortable new reality. Reporters began appearing at the end of Isabel's street, forcing her to keep the children indoors more than usual. Anonymous calls to her phone increased, some merely curious, others disturbingly hostile. Strangers leaving messages questioning her right to unearned wealth or making crude assumptions about how a homeless woman might have gained access to millions. The pressure began to take a toll. Isabel found herself jumping at unexpected sounds, checking locks repeatedly, falling back into the hyper-vigilant patterns that had characterized their months of homelessness. Nightmares returned, dreams of being forced back onto the streets, of having Miguel taken by social services, of standing before a tribunal of bankers who declared her unworthy of her grandfather's legacy. Dr. Levine, the therapist Isabel had been seeing regularly since settling into the house, recognized the signs immediately during their weekly session. "You're experiencing a trauma response," she observed. "Your sense of safety has been threatened again, triggering the same protective mechanisms that helped you survive homelessness." "But it's not the same," Isabel protested. "We have a home, resources. Even if this Lorne person creates problems, we're not in immediate danger." "Your rational mind knows that," Dr. Levine acknowledged, "but your nervous system is still healing from prolonged insecurity. It defaults to high alert at the first sign of threat. This perspective helped, but the practical reality of Lorne's investigation remained a constant weight." Ari visited daily, bringing updates and strategizing their response. Marvin Rowe, the veteran banker who had first verified Isabel's claim, emerged as an unexpected ally, submitting detailed affidavits confirming the legitimacy of the trust activation. A pivotal moment came 10 days into the crisis, when Ari arrived looking simultaneously concerned and triumphant. "I've found the connection," he announced, spreading documents across Isabel's kitchen table. "Victor Lorne's father, Harrison Lorne, was your grandfather's business rival in the 1960 seconds. They competed for the same investment opportunities, particularly in emerging technologies." Isabel studied the yellowed newspaper clippings and corporate filings Ari had unearthed. "So, this is personal after all. Harrison Lorne lost a significant opportunity to your grandfather in 1968, the initial investment that eventually became the cornerstone of the Reyes fortune. The Lorne family never fully recovered financially or socially. Victor grew up with his father's bitterness as a constant backdrop. So he's using me to settle an ancient score," Isabel concluded. "Essentially, yes." Ari gathered the documents back into his portfolio, but this context gives us leverage. It exposes his investigation as personally motivated rather than professionally necessary. 2 days later, Isabel found herself in a wood-paneled conference room at Granite Union Bank's executive offices, facing the Trust Administration Committee and, for the first time, Victor Lorne himself. He was older than she had expected, in his 60s. His expression as she entered was one of calculated disdain. Ari and Marvin flanked Isabel like protective sentinels. On the table before them lay the results of her DNA test, conclusively confirming her lineage to Hugo Reyes, along with birth certificates, family photographs, and other documentation. Ms. Martinez began the committee chairwoman, an elegant woman in her 50s. "Thank you for accommodating this extraordinary review. I want to assure you that the unusual nature of this proceeding does not reflect any institutional position regarding your claim. With respect, Madame Chairwoman," Victor Lorne interrupted, "the nature of this claim justifies extraordinary scrutiny. A homeless woman with no banking history suddenly appears with an ancient access device, claiming a fortune that had been dormant for decades." He spread his hands in a gesture of exaggerated reasonableness. "Surely you understand why questions might arise." "I understand completely, Mr. Lorne," Isabel replied, her voice steady despite the anger coursing through her. "I understand that you're using my family's situation to pursue a vendetta that began before I was born. That's a rather dramatic accusation, Ms. Martinez," he said. "Perhaps your difficult circumstances have left you prone to conspiracies." Harrison Lorne versus Hugo Reyes, 1968, Isabel stated clearly, watching satisfaction drain from Lorne's face. "The Alameda Tech investment opportunity. Your father lost everything because my grandfather saw potential where he saw only risk." She leaned forward slightly. "This isn't about protecting the bank from fraud. This is about your family's grudge against mine." The committee chairwoman's gaze sharpened with interest. "Mr. Lorne, is there a personal connection you failed to disclose when initiating this review?" "Ancient history," Lorne dismissed, though his confidence had visibly diminished. "Completely irrelevant to the present concerns." "I disagree," Marvin Rowe spoke, his decades of institutional authority evident in his tone. "A previously undisclosed conflict of interest compromises the entire investigation." He gestured to the documentation before them. The meeting proceeded with clinical efficiency after that, Lorne's objections increasingly feeble against the weight of evidence and his now exposed bias. By the conclusion, the committee had not only reaffirmed Isabel's claim to the Reyes Trust, but also issued a formal apology for the unnecessary distress caused by procedural overreach. As they gathered their materials to leave, Isabel found herself face to face with Victor Lorne in the corridor outside. Without his audience, his mask of professional concern had vanished, replaced by naked hostility. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Old Hugo might have outmaneuvered my father, but I'm not so easily defeated." "My grandfather set this up so men like you couldn't destroy his family," she replied. "He prepared for this very moment, Mr. Lorne. While your family was nursing grudges, mine was building safeguards." She stepped past him, joining Ari and Marvin, who waited by the elevators. As the doors closed, isolating them from Lorne's glare, Isabel finally allowed her rigid composure to relax slightly. "You were magnificent," Marvin said. "Your grandfather would have been proud." "Lorne won't take this defeat gracefully," Ari cautioned. "He'll almost certainly continue to cause problems, though perhaps less overtly now that his conflict of interest is exposed." Isabel nodded. "Then we'll be prepared," she said. "I've faced worse than an angry banker with wounded pride." Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Isabel sat on her back porch watching the same stars that had witnessed her family's journey from destitution to security. The confrontation with Lorne had been draining, but it had also been clarifying, providing external validation of her right to the legacy her grandfather had left. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider the future, not just in terms of immediate stability, but in terms of lasting impact. What would she do with this inheritance, beyond securing her family's well-being? How could she honor her grandfather's vision while creating her own? 6 months had passed since the confrontation with Victor Lorne. The aftermath had been less dramatic than Isabel had feared. Lorne himself had been quietly removed from his position at Granite Union Bank following an internal ethics review. The media interest had spiked briefly after a DNA test conclusively confirmed Isabel's lineage, then faded as newer scandals captured public attention. Life had settled into what Isabel cautiously accepted as their new normal. Sophie had completed her first full semester at her new school, thriving academically and socially with a resilience that sometimes brought tears to Isabel's eyes. Miguel, now walking and beginning to form words, showed no signs of the health problems. His pediatrician marveled at his development, pronouncing him completely caught up at his last checkup, medical shorthand for the miracle of children's ability to overcome early deprivation when given proper care. And Isabel herself had undergone a transformation that went beyond her external circumstances. The paralyzing shock and disbelief had given way to purposeful acceptance. She no longer felt like an imposter in her own life, a sentiment Dr. Levine had helped her recognize as survivor's guilt, the irrational feeling that she didn't deserve to thrive when others remained in circumstances she had escaped. You honor those still struggling not by diminishing your own good fortune, but by using it meaningfully, Dr. Levine had observed during one of their sessions. The insight had become a guiding principle as Isabel developed a more intentional relationship with her inheritance. With Ari's guidance, she had established a structured approach to philanthropy, not grand public gestures that might attract unwanted attention, but strategic interventions in areas she understood intimately. She funded expanded services at the women's shelter where Shelley worked, created a medical assistance program for families facing catastrophic bills, and established a housing transition initiative specifically designed to help families emerging from homelessness. All of these efforts operated quietly, without Isabel's name attached. She had no desire for recognition or gratitude, only to extend the same lifeline to others that her grandfather had provided for her. Isabel had placed a special photograph on her bedside table, her grandfather Hugo in his later years, gray-haired and distinguished. Some nights when the house was quiet and the children asleep, she would speak to him softly. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself," she whispered one such evening. "I'm trying to make you proud." The changes extended beyond Isabel's immediate family. Jasmine had officially moved into the third bedroom, no longer a temporary guest, but a member of the household. She had completed her GED and enrolled in community college courses, her sharp intelligence finding an outlet beyond the survival skills that had protected her on the streets. Rita, too, had remained a part of their lives, now settled in a seniors' apartment complex, where Isabel had helped her secure a unit. The older woman had become a regular Sunday dinner guest. On this particular autumn afternoon, these extended members of Isabel's chosen family were gathering to celebrate Sophie's 9th birthday. As Isabel finished frosting the homemade cake, chocolate with buttercream, Sophie's favorite, she heard the front door open and Jasmine's voice calling a greeting. "In the kitchen," Isabel responded, setting aside the spatula and wiping her hands on a dish towel. Jasmine appeared in the doorway, her arms laden with party supplies. Behind her came Eleanor, the elderly woman who had shared beans with Isabel during their darkest days, now recovered from her own period of homelessness and volunteering at the senior center where Rita lived. "I got everything on the list," Jasmine announced. "Plus, I picked up Eleanor on the way. Rita's coming with Shelley. They're stopping to get ice cream." Isabel smiled, still sometimes amazed by how effortlessly Jasmine had integrated into their lives, how readily she had accepted responsibilities and connections after years of defensive solitude. "Perfect. Sophie's outside with Miguel if you want to help her finish the leaf pile for the scavenger hunt." As Jasmine headed to the yard, Eleanor began unpacking the party supplies. Paper plates, balloons, small gift bags for Sophie's friends. "Never thought I'd be helping with a child's birthday again at my age," she remarked with quiet pleasure. "Life takes the strangest turns." Isabel nodded, understanding completely the sentiment behind those simple words. 6 months earlier, she couldn't have imagined this scene, this ordinary, joyful moment of preparation for a child's celebration, surrounded by a makeshift family forged through shared hardship and unexpected connection. The birthday party unfolded with the controlled chaos typical of courted 9-year-olds, games in the yard, presents opened with delighted exclamations, cake devoured amid laughter and chatter. Isabel moved through it all with quiet joy, watching her daughter surrounded by friends who knew nothing of the hardships that had preceded this normal childhood moment. As the last guest departed and the immediate family settled in the living room with leftover cake, Sophie curled against Isabel's side on the couch, pleasantly exhausted from the day's excitement. "Was it a good birthday, mi vida?" Isabel asked. "The best ever," Sophie declared, then added thoughtfully, "Mama, I was thinking about something." "What's that? Remember when we used to sleep in that bus shelter, and you told me that someday things would get better?" Sophie looked up. "You were right. They did get better." Isabel swallowed against the sudden tightness in her throat. "Yes, they did. I think that's because you never gave up," Sophie continued, her conviction absolute. Perhaps that stubborn refusal to surrender, even in her darkest moments, had been the true key that unlocked her grandfather's legacy. Perhaps the card's power had always depended not just on bloodline or biometric verification, but on the quality Hugo had recognized in his granddaughter, the same resilience he had drawn upon during his own journey from destitution to security. "Sometimes, mi corazón," Isabel said, "believing isn't about feeling certain. It's about continuing to try even when you're not sure you can succeed." Sophie considered this, then nodded with the grave acceptance of childhood wisdom. "That's what I'm going to remember, for if I ever have hard times, too." Later that night, Isabel sat on her back porch with Jasmine, enjoying the crisp autumn air and the relative quiet after the day's festivities. "Sophie said something interesting today," Isabel mused, watching the stars emerge above the maple tree. "About belief being action rather than feeling. Kids smarter than most adults I've known." She hesitated, then added with uncharacteristic vulnerability, "That's how I survived too, you know. Not because I believed things would get better. I didn't. But I kept moving anyway." Isabel nodded. "And now? Now I'm actually starting to believe. Like, for real." She gestured vaguely toward the house, the yard, the life they had built, this, college. A future that isn't just about getting through the next day. It's still weird, but I'm getting used to it. "Me too," Isabel admitted. "Sometimes I still wake up expecting to find ourselves back in that bus shelter. Then I remember that this is real." Jasmine finished for her. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in her own thoughts. Finally, Jasmine spoke again, her tone deliberately casual in the way that signaled emotional significance. "I got accepted to that social work program, the one Shelley recommended." "Jasmine, that's wonderful news. It's just a certificate program for now, but maybe after that, who knows? I've been thinking I might be good at it, helping kids who've been where I was." "You would be exceptional," Isabel said. "You understand what they need in a way no textbook could teach." Jasmine accepted the praise with minimal deflection, another sign of her evolving comfort, with positive reinforcement. "Anyway, I'll need flexible hours for classes. But I can still help with Miguel and stuff." "We'll make it work," Isabel assured her. "This household runs on mutual support, remember? Your education is just as important as everything else." As Jasmine headed inside to call her academic advisor, Isabel remained on the porch, contemplating the tapestry of interconnected lives that had formed around her family. What had begun as desperate survival had evolved into something richer, a community of mutual care and shared purpose. This, she realized, was perhaps the most valuable aspect of her inheritance, not the financial security, though that remained profoundly important, but the capacity to create a network of support extending beyond her immediate family, to become for others what her grandfather had been for her, a source of unexpected help when conventional systems failed. The next morning, Isabel woke early and drove to the city cemetery, something she had been meaning to do for months, but had somehow never found the right moment to accomplish. The groundskeeper directed her to a modest headstone in the eastern section, where morning light illuminated the simple inscription, Hugo Reyes 1926 to 2000, in chess and in life. Protect what matters most. Isabel placed a small potted plant beside the marker, then stood for a moment in quiet communion with the grandfather who had changed the trajectory of her family's story decades after his death. "I understand now," she said softly to the stone. "Why did you live modestly despite your success? Why did you keep your wealth as a tool rather than an identity?" She smiled slightly. "The kids are thriving. Miguel is walking everywhere, getting into everything. Sophie is so smart, she would have given you a real challenge at chess by now." A gentle breeze stirred the leaves around the cemetery, carrying the scent of autumn earth and distant wood smoke. "I'm helping others," Isabel continued, "quietly, like you did, making differences that matter rather than statements that impress." She touched the carved chess reference on the headstone. "I'm protecting what matters most. Not just my family, but the dignity of those still struggling where we once were." As she turned to leave, Isabel noticed an older man placing flowers at a nearby grave. Their eyes met briefly, and he nodded in the way strangers acknowledge each other in spaces of remembrance. Something in his bearing, a certain dignity despite obvious financial constraints, reminded her of her grandfather. "Good morning," she offered, as they found themselves walking toward the cemetery gate at the same pace. "Morning," he replied with courteous reserve. They walked in companionable silence until reaching the parking area, where the man paused beside an ancient car that appeared to be held together mostly by determination and strategic duct tape. "Having trouble starting it lately," he explained, "but it gets me where I need to go most days." "Transportation can make all the difference," Isabel observed, thinking of how their options had narrowed when they lost their car in the cascade of financial disaster following Luis's death. The man nodded, then hesitated before speaking again. "I don't suppose you know of anyone hiring? I've been looking for months, but at my age," he shrugged, embarrassment warring with necessity. "My daughter's trying to finish community college. I'm trying to keep her from dropping out to support us." Isabel studied him thoughtfully, recognizing the familiar signs of someone working desperately to maintain dignity while facing crushing circumstances. Not yet homeless, perhaps, but teetering on the edge that had once claimed her own family. "Actually," she said, "I might know of an opportunity. What's your background?" By the time they parted ways, Isabel had the man's contact information and a general understanding of his situation. She couldn't guarantee anything, but several of her community initiatives needed coordinators, people who understood firsthand the challenges they were addressing. As she drove home, Isabel reflected on the symmetry of the encounter, how her visit to thank her grandfather for his legacy had immediately presented an opportunity to extend that legacy to another family in need. This was the new normal she had finally embraced. A life where security and purpose had replaced desperate survival, where the remarkable gift she had received became most meaningful when shared with others.